So we want to continue talking about the various elements of the American establishment that are agitating towards a more controlled government. A weird distinction for progressives are they are not socialists, and occasionally some people on the right will conflate them with such. Progressives are absolutely fine with private ownership as long as that private ownership doesn't get in the way of things. Thus, I made a comparison that they have some similarities to fascism and National Socialism in their mid stage before they reach final fruition. I'm not inferring in any way that they agree with the National Socialist program of how socialism needs to be implemented via a racial conflict. Progressives don't believe overtly in any concept of societal conflict in the same way socialists and Marxists do. So the next thing we want to talk about is several concepts that kind of come under the same banner. These are ideas that came out of the Frankfurt School, which were essentially Marxists who came to the conclusion that Marxist revolution could not occur in Europe or the rest of the West. And they came up with several concepts, one of them being cultural Marxism. Now, in the truest sense, they can't be considered a true Marxist because they don't believe in the same class theory issues that Marx would. And so a lot of people disassociate, saying, well, they can't be Marxist because they're not following Marxist ideals. But they still want to create rifts in society, infighting, in order to move closer to Marxist type ideas, a total socialist state. The general ideas of cultural Marxism also rest with critical race theory. And these terms are not brand new terms. They've actually been around since the 30s. So, what cultural Marxism seeks to do is they want to first undermine the family as the basic unit of the foundation of a society. Thus, they favor things like easy divorce laws. They're in favor of abortion. They're in favor of maximum use of birth control. They're in favor of sexual acts being completely decriminalized in all way. They believe in debased, ugly culture. The idea is that creation. So, part of their thought process is that part of the reason why the West was impenetrable to Marxism at that time was that the types of Christianity in Russia and the rest of Europe are very different. Russian Orthodox versus Catholic and Protestant. Whereas the Western side of things pushed individuality far more than the Russian Orthodox, which was more collectivist in nature. So they believed that they needed to attack the idea of beautiful creations. Artwork needed to stop being beautiful and be ugly. And this idea was to basically debase the idea of creation itself. So their idea was to invigorate the culture with abstract things and sexual images and violent images. And then the part about critical race theory that fits into it is the idea that they would create an endless class of minorities and hierarchies in order to create division. So it wasn't sufficient to just say, okay, this particular group, these bunch of groups are all oppressed. You have to give them a ranking of how oppressed they are in order to basically put everybody at each other's throats. Now, one of the things we see is this cultural Marxism began rising heavily in the 60s. Uh, we would start seeing at that point, that's when movies in the United States changed, where there no longer needed to be a good guy to win win at the end of the movie. We started seeing increasing sexual imagery, uh, increasing violence. Uh, so there was a surge of Marxism in the 60s, and this is pretty much where Marxists had given up wholly on the idea that they could infiltrate the West. And so the cultural Marxism that came out of the Frankfurt School captured all the Marxists' imagination. And as the 60s started taming down, essentially the left attempted to absorb these Marxists into their midst in order to harness their energy and hopefully kind of keep them under control. But what ended up happening is these Marxists infiltrated the education system at all levels. First working their way up through the universities, taking over the educational programs, and then educating the next generation of educators at all levels. Where we can kind of see the fruits of their labor appearing at all levels of education today. The end goal of the Frankfurt School is total Marxism, total socialism on a Marxist style system. There are some deliberate mimicry of National Socialism because these folks were coming up with their ideas while in Nazi Germany. So the idea of pitting races against each other actually has Nazi roots. And so they don't necessarily, at the level, at the high thinking level, they don't believe in the divisions. They just merely agitate the divisions to exploit them. And uh, the next one we want to talk about are democratic socialists. We have our own democratic socialists now. I talked about them in the earlier video, talking about where they came from. Democratic socialists have been strong in Europe for a very long time, over 100 years. Democratic socialists hid in the United States because the term socialist was the kiss of death for anything political for the longest time. Now that the environment is getting closer to where more people are accepting of socialism, there are people who come out and openly admit being democratic socialists. Two most famous right now are Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Uh, they still believe in the general democratic socialist ideals, the idea of pushing the envelope to get as much socialism as they can achieve, whilst doing it with minimum force. They want to achieve their way at the ballot box. So our next player is Antifa. Now, Antifa is a weird little group. Essentially, they are not a typical hierarchical group. They do a lot of their organizing via peer-to-peer style methods. They do have individuals who will go to places from time to time to provide training, but there's very little hierarchy to take out on this organization. Antifa claims its roots back to the original German Marxists that were attempting to take over Germany when there was the street fighting of the 20s and 30s. Kinda, yeah. I mean, they don't have absolute lineage to there, they just have philosophical lineage. But make no mistake about it, they are truly Marxists. They tend to be of the anarchic variety, meaning their goal is to see fourth stage Marxism, either with anarchy or communes as being the highest level of government. These groups are essentially being used by all the other major groups out there. The progressives, uh, socialists, cultural Marxists, they're all using Antifa as an arm of agitation, basically create instability in order to allow government to be able to expand the things they're doing. Antifa, on the other hand, does believe that they are they believe they're their own thing, that they can actually achieve what they're trying to achieve. And then another major item we have to deal with is essentially the open society foundations. Some of these are do get large amounts of Soros money. This is not conspiracy stuff in the remotest. There are more open society foundations than just Soros, and there are other people contributing to it. But we're dealing with money coming from rich American socialists and socialists from across Europe who are attempting to create change in the United States by influencing a lot of organizations. Essentially, they funnel money to various organizations, falling from everything from educational organizations to legal defense funds, in order to create both a change in belief systems and also to create agitation. Money from these open society foundations find their way into elections of local district attorneys, which is causing a lot of problems in terms of ones who believe that they can solve racial inequity issues in crime by not charging, basically setting up a system based on ratios rather than actual who's doing the crime. This money finds its way into Antifa organizations, specifically in the form of legal defense funds that bail their people out of jail when they get into trouble. This money finds its way into organizations like Black Lives Matter. And so this money is basically causing agitation on all kinds of different fronts, attempting to push things in a certain way. Some of this money is used to help, if you've heard of like the immigrant caravans that occasionally have been rolling up from South America. Money from these open society foundations send volunteers out to these groups to basically help give them food and water, give them assistance getting to the border, and then giving them instructions on how to fill out forms and what verbiage to say to get the initial refugee status that a lot of them are seeking. So this is all the players now. So now that we have all the players together, we can start discussing how it's all coming together and what are the possible likelihoods. That in itself would probably be best in the next video. So if you have any questions on what we've talked about, please comment below, smash the like button. If YouTube has brought you here and you're not a regular subscriber, please consider looking at my titles. I have a lot of different topics. You might find a lot of things interesting. Consider subscribing. And if you know somebody who might find this interesting, please share it with them. Right? Hope to see you again in a future video.